last year and a half or so. You'll notice there are also some controversies associated with us being a Tier 1 research university. What's it costing us at Texas A&M to have such a major commitment to research? First point I want to bring up is that if you look at the budget of Texas A&M University, and I know we all are concerned about the costs of attending university, you all are freshmen and you're paying plenty to be here. Your tuition only counts for about 25% of the overall operating costs. State contribution also, give or take 3%, 25%. But for the overall operating cost of this institution, these research efforts by faculty, which are often externally funded by organizations like the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, private industry, other types of granting and funding foundations, that brings in about half the budget for Texas A&M University, half of our operating budget, which is actually pretty impressive. And again, that's one of the reasons we qualify as a Tier 1 institution. And that sounds great. Every time someone talks about how big the football program is, the response that comes back is yes, but they generate a lot of funding and goodwill for Texas A&M University. Research is exactly the same. It generates funding, it generates goodwill, but does it do that at a cost? The concern these days, of course, is that everybody is worried about how much college education costs, especially your parents. And the concern is that this contribution to research is going to be something that is going to impact the cost of college to the point that it's going to be too expensive for many people to attend. And the concern is specifically that faculty who have a strong commitment to research and are great researchers aren't pulling their weight on the teaching side. They're not spending enough time in the classroom. They're not contributing enough to the education of undergraduate students. This came to a head about a year ago, and actually it's still ongoing. Last summer, there was essentially an insurgency among the faculty because they were concerned that there were trends in the administration of Texas A&M University leading us toward a situation where research was imperiled and the contribution of research to faculty productivity was going to be inappropriately appreciated. And I asked you to look at a couple of things before you came here today. One was a website that was started by several very distinguished former students of this institution in industry who felt that it was extremely important at that time to defend the research endeavor at Texas A&M University. The other was some background on why Dr. Jamie Grunland, who is a professor of chemical engineering, was standing in front of the regents and making a plea to support the research enterprise at Texas A&M University. In the last year or two, there have been some suggestions that perhaps one of the ways that we can control the costs of college are, first of all, to limit the research endeavor. In fact, in the Houston Chronicle about 3 weeks ago, there was an editorial, and in that editorial it was proposed that every department on this campus institute a research oversight committee, and that every year those committees would review the research programs of every faculty member in that department, and when they found situations where they considered to be excessive research occurring, they would limit excessive research. And I have no idea what's meant by excessive research. So one possibility is that in order to improve the quality of your education and reduce the cost of your education, you need to move faculty out of their laboratories and have them standing in front of you like I am doing now and speaking to you. That would mean that faculty should focus more attention on their teaching. And that was what elicited some of the faculty backlash last summer, which you may have heard about. And that's what got Dr. Grunland to come to talk to the Board of Regents. The concern was, and if you listen to Dr. Grunland's impassioned speech to the Board of Regents, in the end, when they were cutting him off, he was actually asking the Board of Regents if they would discontinue a teaching award program for faculty. And that sounds a little bit contradictory. Why would a faculty member, even when my understanding is that Dr. Grunland's an excellent teacher, why would the faculty want to discontinue teaching awards when in fact the purpose of that award program was to hand cash to faculty who are great in the classroom as based on student electronic evaluations? The concern was that the faculty perceived that this was part of a trend in the university to begin to try to force faculty out of their research programs more into the teaching programs. And at some point, a line had to be drawn in the sand, and it was at that Regents meeting last year. And this discussion, impassioned discussion, is still proceeding. So I wanted you to look at that video, partly because I think Dr. Gwendolyn makes a very strong argument for the strengths of research at Texas A&M, but partly because I wanted you to see how impassioned he was. This is what research and participation in research can do to faculty. And if you want to be a part of that passion, you have the opportunity to do so. Okay. I don't want to make it sound like you don't benefit from being at a Tier 1 research institution. In fact, I happen to find a somewhat self-serving website. It's a blog by Jeremy Hyman and Lynn Jacobs, and they posted about 2 years ago a list of the 10 reasons that you benefit from being at a research institution. One of them is that top researchers can also be top teachers. The very first class that I took in my area of specialization was taught by a senior faculty member who was a member of the National Academy of Sciences and was the person who actually founded my field of specialization. He knew everybody. He had been around the experiments, the definitive experiments in his area for the last 40 years, and he could tell you about how they were done, and he could tell you about the excitement of discovery. He had a great research program. He was well funded for many years, but he also brought that into the classroom with him. And when you have faculty who are active in research, those individuals can immediately transfer information that they're gaining from their research into the classroom. You're not going to get up-to-date information from somebody who's writing their lectures out of Wikipedia, not that anyone ever does that. I've been to a couple of meetings where I received information, or I've heard a talk at the meeting that's gotten me very excited because it's provided the answer to a question that I've been asking students in my class. I teach an undergraduate animal physiology class, and there are several processes that occur in animals, and not to get too wonky on you, but fish are really interesting because they can move back and forth between saltwater and freshwater. But when they do that, they have to move ions in opposite directions across their skin. And the model for many years was that there was just one cell, and that cell figured out how to move ions backwards and forwards as the fish moved between different salinities, and that was never terribly satisfying. I went to a meeting about 1.5 years ago. I saw a colleague there, and he said, "Big deal, we've just discovered there are actually 2 different cell types." Okay, this sounds pretty trivial to you, but this solved a question that we'd had in physiology for a long time, and I was teaching that information to my class a couple of weeks later. That's because I was engaged in the process, I knew the people who were doing it, and I was able to transfer that information over and make it useful. Students in my class had up-to-date information. And associated with that, I got really excited because I knew it was answering a question we'd been talking about for many years, and when I presented it, I was able to be a lot more enthusiastic than I perhaps would have been had I been presenting the old, somewhat unsatisfactory model year after year after year. And so faculty participating in research, especially when they're talking about what they know, can get much more excited, much more energized, and they can bring that into the classroom. Okay, this is what I'm going to proceed with a little bit more later on. The idea that if research is going on campus, you can be involved in it. There's no reason why you can't. And the types of activities, not only internships, but undergraduate collaborative research, in some cases with the world's expert in the area of your interest. The other thing that you'll see, again, I'm a biologist. I spent a lot of time recruiting students to Texas A&M, especially graduate students. And one of the things I tell those students is one of the great things about Texas A&M is if you're interested in biological sciences, there are about 25 different biological science departments on this campus. If you count the College of Agriculture, the College of Science, the vet school, the med school, you count the College of Liberal Arts as a psychology department. You can count health and kinesiology. Because of the research interests of the faculty and the diversity and size of the faculty at Texas A&M, we have a remarkable range of options available for you to find your interests on this campus. And you don't even need to do research in your own department. You can do research in the medical school. You can do it in kinesiology. You can find that project that's appropriate for you. Well, we can do that again because we have the diversity and the powerful research program here. The other thing that you're going to want to take advantage of at Texas A&M, and again, this only happens at these big Tier 1 research universities, is there are remarkable resources here. We have a fabulous library. I'm still discovering things. I've been here 30 years. I'm still discovering things I didn't know the library did. And I'm making more and more connections actually with librarians because of the things I do here in the honors office. I know we have a great library because my graduate students leave here and they go to other institutions and they start emailing me and asking me if I can find journal articles for them that they can't get anywhere else. Don't tell anyone that because supposedly that's not legal. The other thing is, there is equipment on this campus that does remarkable things. We have a cyclotron. We have imaging equipment over in the vet school that is capable of making high-resolution PET scan images of animals up to the size of cattle. We have remarkable laser facilities. We have fabulous high-throughput DNA sequencing facilities. That's not something Texas A&M set out to set up. That's something that actually the research programs on this campus found the support for, recruited the money. In many cases, they applied outside Texas for that money, for example, from the federal government, to provide us with the most up-to-date possible facilities for doing the research on this campus. And you, again, have the opportunity to work with us. And I know students, undergraduate students here, are working with all those facilities because I'm going to read all of the research proposals for the undergraduate scholars program. And as I read those proposals, I keep saying, wow, they're letting an undergraduate mess with that? And I know it's because we want